Hello and welcome to the New York Empire podcast presented by the greatest ultimate bag. I'm Dan Hilton, and joining me today is fourth-year Empire player Nori To and third-year Empire player Sam Feder. How's it going, guys?
Hey, Dan.
It's going well, Dan.
Having us.
So before we have too much fun on today's show, because for both of you, this is your second time around. So for those who want the full backstory on Sam's ultimate journey, for those who want the full backstory on Nori's ultimate journey, where they started, how they got to the Empire, you can actually go back in the feed, whether you're listening on the podcast or, well, actually go to the podcast. It's not on the video, but go back on the podcast feed and find those individual shows. Because together, we're going to talk all about the Empire this season and the last few seasons that these two vets, I want to call them, have been around the team. So we are getting closer and closer to the start of the AUDL season. And before we do the whole thing about the Empire, I know you're both pretty well students of the game. Which off-season moves around the rest of the league have piqued your interest so far? Nora, you want to go first?
Yeah, I was actually
excluding Antoine Davis, though, excluding or Ethan, excluding the pickups for the Empire. Of course, you're excited about those. I mean, around the league.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Matt Cat Stevens, before the season, and we were just talking about this where we thought that the West Division was definitely looking really, really competitive, especially with Colorado, Oregon. I mean, those teams, like you can see, like the college teams are like very competitive in like the college championships. So they're definitely going to like recruit all those like really good players, even like the club teams like Johnny Bravo, Rhino Slam, like all those players. I've seen a couple of some of the rosters. And so like, I think those teams are definitely going to be like number one, number two, maybe. I don't think they're going to be very in like the low rankings in the West. I think they're going to be very competitive. So I'm excited to see what they're going to be like throughout the season.
Yeah, Sam.
Yeah, it's so interesting now with like Portland having a new team. Like I think Jack Hatchett's playing for Portland this year, and technically he would count as a rookie, I guess, which is kind of funny. I mean, he's obviously like a dominant player. He's like formerly club, I think defensive player of the year for the men's division.
Yes. Yep.
So yeah, obviously that's huge, and it's going to be fun to see how the new teams develop. But yeah, I think like Atlanta is obviously we got Swan, but you know, they now have Leaf, and I think they got Abe Coffin also, right? So
Minnesota. Abe Coffin
is Minnesota.
Oh, who they signed someone else, I think, right? I'm like blanking on who.
Bobby Lay.
Bobby Lay, yeah, thanks.
And Brad St. Johns. We cannot forget about Brad St. Johns either.
Yeah, I mean, just like, you know, at first it looked a little, you know, sad for them to lose Swan, but now they've like beefed up even more. So, you know, it's crazy like how good these teams are going to be, and it's going to be fun to see how well they do.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with both of you. Khalif El Salam coming to the East is really exciting. I circled that one as maybe my favorite one, because seeing what Atlanta did and Miranda Knowles is so smart with those zones and what he could be for her, a player that she's known for 10 years. Yeah, and you mentioned it too, Nori. We keep saying new for Colorado and Portland, but I looked at Portland's roster and I go back to my own MOU days, and I'm thinking there's some Portland Stags on that team. And Timmy Purston, he's been around a long time, famous for the orange beanie he wore for all those years. And Rafi Hayes, the name that I hadn't thought about outside the club scene a little bit of a time. And then Lando Marks as well. That's a guy who is a new AUDL player. And again, one of those guys, just like Ed Brown in Philly, that I'm circling saying, hey, that might be an all rookie team selection, a la from last year. Sam?
Well, it's so funny to like think about what an all rookie team could be with all these players who are
because they're
so experienced.
Yeah. I think Jack Hatchett, you have to put a little bit of an asterisk next to him, but it's in theory he actually was technically part of the 2017 Empire, even though he did not play. But okay, so that was a fun little segment we did there. But let's focus back on the work that you guys have to do preparing for some of these other teams, in particular in your own division. Sam, you and I have spoken before about your approach to watching film and traveling together sometimes. So how do you think the US-based teams, that being New York, DC, Philly, and Boston, will look at the Canadian team's footage, Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto, from last year's Canadian Cup, and kind of judging that from your 2021 and what you know about DC, Philly, and Boston to what you saw from those three teams who only played one another?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be super interesting to sort of see how they react, I guess, to like playing us. Because if anything, they might be a little more limited in terms of experience playing against like the teams that are now, sort of in the same division as them. I think the onus is maybe a little bit on them to sort of figure that out. We've sort of gotten experience playing each other last year, obviously. I think it'll be kind of a fun new dynamic to add to the mix. I think like especially being just generally adaptable is something that we've tried to work on in general, just like being able to like mid-game adjust to new strategies. And that's, no matter how much film preparation you do, that's always going to be at play, but the mid-game adjustments you make.
And, Nori, you've been around the team now for multiple years. The institutional knowledge is starting to build up. So like Sam, you so often have to be part of the scout. So the Empire O-line knows what they might face, right? As opposed to, yes, the defense, you guys want to know what you're facing on the other side with their O-line. But the inverse of that is at practices, you're taking the place of the opposition's D-line. So with that scout, how has that process changed over the years for you individually and from coach to coach as well?
Yeah, I mean, the Canadian teams have been like really strong every single year. Like 2018, Toronto was like unbeatable until we took them in the playoff game to go to championship weekend. Even in 2019, like Montreal has been like really strong. And I remember one game that we were at Montreal and we were actually down, but then later in like the second half, we ended up making a comeback. But, I think we have a like really strong team every year, but sometimes we get in our heads that like we're like maybe too strong or something sometimes. But I think that we have to continue to like really play our best game, mentally always be like focused and really in every single moment. But yeah, I mean, I know it's been like 1 to 2 years since we played the Canadian team, so I think it's gonna be a really good and fun experience for us to be able to play against them, but then to also play against the US teams as well. So but yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, and one more about the prep, Sam, back to you. As you get more and more comfortable now in your 30 with the Empire with matchups around the league, now you're comfortable playing Philly and DC, in particular Boston. Yeah, it's only been 1 year and it's been 3 years since you play the Canadian teams, oddly enough. But have you started to figure out the shortcuts of what to look for to speed up your prep process, as opposed to, really watching every single little thing and every single play, picking out what you need to know to look for?
Yeah, I think something that's helpful for me there is that now being in my third year, I think I have like more of a sense of what my role is. So instead of sort of looking at the entire game footage and just seeing like, what were the turns downfield? How did they get those turns? What were the turns of the backfield? How did they get those? I can focus a little more on the sorts of things that I'll be doing and not worry as much about, say, like the deep balls where there's, those aren't the ones that I'm going to be a part of. I'm not going to be skying like AJ Merriman, for a block. Yeah, so I think like DC, obviously like a lot of handler movement, like that's something to keep an eye on. I think, I have sort of experience like that. I'll sort of think back on when we play them next and think, okay, I know that they were doing that sort of quick handler movement to keep the disc moving and just keep their offense from turning it. I do think like I'm a little more focused based on my experience and the role I know I have now.
Well, Sam, if you do ever get one on Defensive Player of the Year, AJ Merriman, I promise I'll bring you right back on the podcast that following week just to talk about however that came to be.
I mean, we're both D-lines. So it's never going to happen anyway.
Correct.
He's just like the king of getting those. So,
Yeah. Once you crossovers to your O-line, then maybe you got a shot too.
Oddly for you, Sam, that was interesting. For so many of the players that did take other moves over, because even Lithio played 7 D points last year. He was, I think, the smallest number of O-line, or D points rather. That was Lithio. You had the smallest number of O-line points for a player with at least, I think it was like 100 points played, and it was 0. You played 0 actual O-line. Anyway, so yes, it's unlikely, but hey, crazy things have happened on an ultimate field. Now, Nori, at 22, you're still one of the younger players on the team, even though it's your 4th season. What has been your greatest area of focus since you joined the Empire in 2018?
Definitely asking as much feedback as possible from the veterans and the coaches. Like sometimes I feel like I might get a little annoying because I like to ask feedback like almost every practice to like specific players, and sometimes, but I don't know. I feel like it's like the best opportunity because I know like young players don't exactly get like the highest level of play opportunity all the time. So I mean, it's an honor to be able to even be part of the team with all these world class players, these all stars. So every practice, try to take like the toughest matchup and like learn from your mistakes and play your best. And then just continue to ask for feedback is like what I really like to do, so that I can really improve and focus on for like next practice, and even watch the film and maybe do some film sessions with them because I've done that with teammates too. But yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the most important thing for me, to just like continue to grow as a player, for the future of the Empire. So I'm hoping to, be able to take that role in the future too.
And Sam, speaking of improvements, I'm not going to tell you who, but I did have some internal Empire support and one or two external supporters that you were one of the most, if not the most improved player on the Empire and arguably around the league, at least based on your role, of course, last year. Did you see, or did you feel yourself take that leap last year? Or is that just some people, including myself, making that up? I mean, they're pretty smart people. I'm not going to say the names, but people who know the game better than me.
Yeah, we'll talk after this, I guess.
Well, I'm not going to let you.
I'm gonna get those names.
Know who. I had to get too big, but yeah. Did you feel that though? Did you feel the improvements you made?
Yeah. I like it. Just regardless of like the actual outcomes of the stuff that like seemed visually to be like, oh, he's improved a lot. Like I just felt more comfortable on the field. I think it was good to have just like that first year under my belt and just kind of have a sense of, oh, this is like a little different than college. Obviously the play is a lot higher, and the field's a lot bigger. Those are the two biggest differences. But yeah, I think also it was sort of opportunistic. We were dealing with like a lot of injuries last year, so there was like a little more opportunity to prove myself. And that's just sort of luck, just opportunistic experiences that I got to have. But yeah, I think like support from teammates and coaches, just spending time working on the game, getting more comfortable on the field, like regardless of like how much work I was putting in to get better, just the fact that I had that first year under my belt, I think was like a big difference for me. And I was like, okay, I know what this is now that I'm familiar with the process and the format, I can sort of, focus a little more on improving my game.
So on that point, did you do something different leading up to the 2021 season, aside from being stuck in your house for an entire year?
I mean, leading up to 2021, I know we talked about before, but watching film was a very big thing for me. I wasn't in a consistent workout routine, so that wasn't a huge factor. But when I was working out, I had like game footage on the side. So I was like watching games while I was working out. I was sort of in the mindset to just, get better. So doing those two things at the same time, really kind of put me in a good mindset to learn. But yeah, even otherwise, I would sort of watch full games and just sort of, pause and play, make sure I understood like what the spacing looked like, what it should look like. Yeah. And then I think this year, like my approach is a little different. I'm focused a little more on the workout side of things. Just trying to get my body into the right place so I can perform the best I can when I'm on the field.
Well, Nori, speaking of performances, you got your AUDL highlight last season at home. You know which one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
What was the reaction to your layout block after that game?
I mean, for me, I was just like, wow, I finally got one. But I think like after the point was over, the entire sideline just came running at me, and I could also hear like my siblings in the stands and just like other people going, just like roaring in the stands. But yeah, I felt it was a really like amazing feeling to just like be able to like get that block and then celebrate with my teammates. Just like pour love on them. It's just like it's just it felt so contagious to just like be so happy with everyone and just continue to perform and just celebrate the win afterwards.
That was definitely one of the highlights of the season for me.
Yeah, a lot of support from your teammates. And yeah, I mean, I know that you guys have had, the team it's been a fortress at Joseph F. Facina Field. I mean, the insane stat that Jack Williams has never lost a game at Joseph F. Facina Field is an interesting one. But there's also, again, going to Canada now, a lot more travel. So you've both been on the team for a few years now. What have been some of the highs and lows of traveling?
Definitely a high for me is seeing people in different cities that I know. I think it's something that I would want to do over the summer if I weren't playing AUDL and not have the opportunity to do. And it just sort of helps facilitate that. I've got some good friends in DC. I stayed with some family and friends in Toronto when we were there in 2019. Is just like a great opportunity. The lows are obviously, it just takes a chunk out of your weekend, and then it can sometimes be tough to start work on Monday.
Yeah, I agree. It's just like, I mean, traveling is so much fun, and it's just like getting to see like other people play, or not even just play, but just like being able to see like other people come watch your games at like away games, being able to like have them visit the games and just like watch. And but I think the bus rides, like when we used to have them, and just like even car rides, like when we carpools, like it's super fun to be able to like get to know each other a lot more, and like the team bonding aspect. I think that's definitely a high for me. But yeah, I agree with Sam. Like the low is just like once you finish a game, after a long car ride or bus ride the next morning, you might have work in the early morning. I know I had that back in 2021, but still super fun overall. It's a great experience.
Yeah. Also, I will say, sorry, I mean, but the experience of playing an away game, like when you're sort of the outsiders as a team, it's such a like, it sort of bonds you as a team in a really cool way. I think like playing club in college, you don't really get that experience because it's just everyone's at a tournament, nobody knows the field. But it's totally different. You show up to another team's field and it's like their crowd in the stands.
Yeah.
And then when you do well and you shut up the crowd, it's an awesome feeling. And it's sort of like you as a team are the ones that are coming in and sort of wreaking havoc in this other field. And it's just, it just bonds you, I think.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of good experiences on the road, as you mentioned, especially going back to Canada now this year will be interesting for the team to do. And now I want to focus too on the New York area, where you both have been playing in the New York or Connecticut or the New Jersey area for your entire careers. And so you've also both played on club teams in the New York area. And it seems like, to me, the talent pool is getting deeper and deeper. And as a guy in his early 20s, Nori, and Sam as a guy in his mid 20s, what do you think New York's path forward is to incorporating younger players into higher level competition?
Yeah. I also, it's not in New York, but I went to college in Connecticut, and it's sort of, same area, and it's a similar sort of vibe. The Metro East and the college division, it's like this whole, conversation about how do we get the talent pool to extend down to the high school level and really sort of build a pipeline the same ways like the Triangle region does. And I think in an earlier episode on the show, I think maybe Jeff was talking about it. New York is sort of a transient city, so you get these high level players passing through, and especially now with the Stevens, they're and Empire, high level players are specifically reaching out to people and getting them to come. And so there are a lot of people. It sometimes doesn't feel like in certain ways it extends all the way down. So like at the top levels, it's super deep. And then, you get to high school level and sort of college level, it's not really there. But I think there is a lot of opportunity there because people in college, I can speak to the Metro East region, at least. I didn't really play in high school, but Metro East, like, there's just a lot of opportunity there to sort of keep people in the region. Like people come to New York, and people who go to New York schools will often stay in New York. So I think really sort of, having coaches sort of really commit to these teams and allow them to grow and, sort of invest in their development will go a long way.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely guilty of going to college in New York and then staying in New York. And Nori, of course, your answer to this is going to shade a bit more to New Jersey. And of course, we have heard so many people, even from the man himself and Anthony Nunez. It's hard to bring up New Jersey Ultimate without saying Anthony Nunez's name or bringing up the term devil, but as far as you in New Jersey, is that the way that you're just going to have to continue on in that program, that we're going to keep seeing more and more high level players coming out of coming out of that New Jersey region in that way?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's just like, I know, like, especially in New York, I know the young players, even like, especially now, it's just like they're looking for colleges that, like, if they were to play Ultimate, they want to play in like a very high caliber team. So, like, UNC, Carleton, Minnesota, Pittsburgh. I mean, you name it, like all those top teams is like where everyone's aiming for. And doesn't seem like New York is like going up there in terms of the Metro East region. So I feel like that's why we're not exactly being able to have the opportunity to invest in like younger players. But I mean, at tryouts, we had a couple young players from New Jersey area, like my friend Chris McLaughlin. He just recently got signed as well, and so he's also from Devil, and he played with me. So it's nice that we can recruit some younger players.
Right? Another Rutgers guy.
Yeah, Rutgers guy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, but yeah, I think it's definitely growing little by little though, because we're able to like coach them, or like the higher level players are definitely starting to like invest in like the players who like were able to represent like team and national level teams like WJUC, like World Junior Championships. And so like those players being able to get those opportunities are like kind of like eye opening for like some of like the higher level players, and they like tell them that they're definitely like investable. And so like I feel like they're starting to recruit them more. And then but yeah, I think it's definitely difficult because like again, it's just like everyone's trying to just go for the high caliber players, and then they end up like just staying at those schools or like that area, and they don't end up coming back to New York area. So but I think being able to play like the other players, they're still playing in like the mid regionals level teams, and it's really difficult to be able to like make that jump from like the mid-level regional team to like a team like Pony, because it's just a huge difference between the level of play. So it's just like we have to continue to be able to play for those teams and really invest to like grow within those teams. But I think like the more you play, then the more you improve, and then you're going to be able to like be up at that level with like the Pony players one day. So, but
yeah, I mean,
isn't that
the answer, right? That it's the same problem that college basketball has, or even college football in the New York region, where you're talking about Syracuse, you're talking about Buffalo, you're talking about Cornell, and those are hours and hours away. While so many other places, you talk about Duke and North Carolina are 10 minutes away from each other on Tobacco Road. And these places they are college towns first, and then they eke out. I mean, some of the bigger, we'll say, college areas related to New York would be even Delaware we're talking about, right? I mean, that's how close it might be. Because then you're talking about a school like NYU, or, I mean, Rutgers is actually the one that has produced the most Empire players over time as far as a New York, New Jersey school, for sure. Sam, you have anything more to add, or you want to move on?
I will say that I don't know this, but it does feel like, say, just at like the pickup that happens and the leagues that happen around New York, there is more interest than like a few years ago. It feels like the community is growing. So I think there is like a larger and larger pool of people that, for which a pipeline can be built and invested in to sort of help like create talent. But I don't, it's just a trend that I feel like is happening, but I don't really know how you get from like the people who are interested in playing in league and pick up and sort of really developing them.
Yeah, well, we're going to go in the complete opposite direction of young players. We're going to go with some of the veterans and stuff on the Empire this season. So you've been and seen some incredible athletes play for the Empire in your years on the team. And so for this question, I'm going to disqualify. I'll do this slowly. I'm going to disqualify Babbitt, Yacht, Osgar, Jack, Marquez, and new teammate Antoine Davis. I think those guys physically are a bit cheat codes, and so who do fans not get to see as much, though, that is way more athletic than the people from the outside think? That just there's something special about them physically, athletically, in practice, even if the ultimate acumen is even catching up in certain remarks.
Nori is.
I was going to say Sam better.
I swear, we the last practice we always sort of start with mini and warm-ups, and there was a huck that went up. I can't remember who Nori was guarding, but Nori just sort of ran past them and got the D. Nori is just like one of the fastest people on the team, maybe the fastest person on the team. If we're not allowed to say each other, maybe I would go with, I don't know, maybe Nori, you can say something. Let me think about it a little more.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I was gonna say Sam as well, but then I mean, a little bit going into Sam, it's just like, I mean, if you watch like honestly, every game, you see like how he's just he's almost like, he's always on the person's hip, but he's always like laying out, and it's just like he's literally just like so close to every single block. And honestly, I'm always on the sideline just jumping. I'm like, oh, Sam, like it's so close. But I mean, Sam is gonna go crazy this year for sure. Like I'm super excited every single time. Like I watch him in a game. I'm always like, Sam's gonna blow someone up. Like it's bound to happen. But yeah, if I can't say Sam, then definitely Ryan Drost. Like Ryan Drost, like we play mini on Mondays, and then like it's like 3v3s, and Ryan's always just locking down his guy. He's getting like unbelievable blocks that you like wouldn't even think like people could get, but if they get it, it's kind of like a classic Ryan Drost block. You know, it's just like only Ryan could do that.
Isn't it the irony of Ryan and Mike Drost that the two of them, of course, they're 3 and 1 respectively on the all-time blocks list, and yet they just are not spoken about as these lockdown, incredible defenders around the league. They're considered guys that have been around for a long time. They're old guys that have put up numbers over a long amount of time. They're not considered guys that are just right that are still just locking fools down at the in their 30s. And
right.
What I talked about. And speaking of Nori, speaking of your speed though, a follow-up to that, a name we've already mentioned. Back in January, you set a new personal record of 24 miles per hour. What role did the new Portland Nitros Jack Hatchett have to do with that?
Oh, well, in the Pony group chat, we have this workout group, and so Jack also does speed workouts and like speed sessions. I think in the Portland area, and so he hit a new record of 22.4 miles per hour, and so then he like messaged me in the group chat and like kind of like tagged me. He was just like, "No, try to beat me," and so I was like, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." And so I went to the speed facility that I train at from time to time, and so I was telling the coaches, I was just like, "Can I try to ramp this up to just like 22 miles per hour, 23 miles per hour, see how fast I can go?" And then so I gave it a shot, and then 23 actually felt pretty easy. And so I tried to go up a little bit more and try 24, and that was definitely like pushing like the limits like crazy. But once I was able to hit like that top speed, I like jumped off the treadmill and I was just like, let's go. And like all my teammates were like going crazy because they'd never seen like that before. And so I was really happy, but then I immediately thought about Jack. I was just like, take that, Jack. But
well, that rivalry will have to take place sometime, maybe in championship weekend. Who knows? If we'll get to see that speed like for like in an actual race. But speaking of, one last question with the Empire, then we're going to have 2 questions of a little bit of fun. But there's been a number of new faces with the ability to handle on the D line this season. A number of D line handlers have been announced. We've heard them on the show. How has the process of getting used to them been for you guys? As far as, I mean, looking at the practice schedule, sometimes D will only get 1 chance to convert, right? So you're really not getting that many reps depending on what the drill is with those D-line handlers. But yeah, what has that process been like, Sam?
I think it's still a little early, and there's still pieces moving. So it's not like I'm sort of working on my chemistry with the particular handler right now, or a particular new set of handlers. And even like last practice, we weren't even doing like D-line and O-line. We sort of were mixed up. So it wasn't necessarily a chemistry building experience. But I think it's like a new thing to consider on the field, say when like Ethan has the disc, because he can just boost it. And I think we did have that last year. We had people on D-line who could boost it, but it's just like more opportunity to go deep on, if there's a turn. In scrimmages have been just like putting it deep, and there have been a lot of quick D-line scores at practice, which have been pretty exciting. We can just sort of know that that's an option now.
All right, so let's end the show with a little bit of fun, away from the Empire, done with the ultimate talk. Nori, we do want to officially congratulate you on the show on being accepted to and attending the Pastry Specialties in the fall. So now you've already been hard at work, though. If anybody follows you on Instagram, we'll see that you've been hard at work already, showing off your, if I want to get this right, eclairs, cream puffs, lemon meringue tart, macarons, Japanese souffle cheesecake, Japanese strawberry shortcake. Is there something that you feel like you specialize in so far as you start your journey in the culinary world?
Creme brulee.
Yeah, yeah. Creme brulees are definitely something that I really like to make as well. But I think the pastry that I definitely enjoy like making all the time is definitely mousse cakes. It's just like it's so like you can do so many different flavors with it, and it's just like the base of like whipped cream. But like it's so I don't know, like just like eating it, it's just so satisfying because it's like so smooth, and you could put like so many like different types of like ingredients inside, like different insert creams or like pralines, like you name it. But like it's just probably one of the best things that any person who craves desserts will definitely love.
Well, Sam, if you could only eat one of those that I just mentioned, or one of the things that Nori has made and potentially brought to practice, which one are you sticking with? You got to throw the rest away.
Well, yeah, the mousse. I said creme brulee because that I was like he brought that to championship weekend last year, and it was so impressive. He like used a blowtorch and everything. But the mousse that he brought the delivery to practice was so good, and he like brings them in like they're like displayed well, even though he's bringing them to practice in a car and everything. He like really puts effort behind them, and it's so good. It's like, and he just puts in the right amount of like something in like the center of it. And I don't know, it's so good. The mousse, I would go with the mousse because that when he brought that the other day, it was so good.
Yeah, well, I mean, Nori, hopefully if the Empire are to recapture the AUDL championship, I myself, and unfortunately we didn't have desserts for the podcast today, but I'm very much looking forward to the championship party potentially and seeing what Nori has cooked up for to go along with a potential trophy. So Sam, Nori, thanks so much for joining the show for the second time. And yeah, we appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks for having us, Dan.
And thanks so much to you, the listeners, as this wraps up another edition of the New York Empire podcast. From the entire New York Empire family, we'll talk to you again soon.